Peace and welcome to the culture right here on the Black Star Network. I am your host, Farajii. Thank you for checking in. Folks, today we got a great show for you. First, we're going to be checking out our brand new segment, The Horn Report, as we talk to Professor Dr. Gerald Horn to give us an update on a variety of international and national issues. We'll have that conversation. Also, let's talk about the legal drama of classified documents and former President Donald Trump. What's next for the president? Will he suffer any consequences? We check in with Professor Rutledge, a law professor and attorney, to give us her take on it. And then later, can we talk about the Sutherland Springs mass shooting? That was a major mass shooting claiming the lives of more than 20 people. We get an update from one of the victims' attorneys to give us an insight as to what's going to be happening next in that mass shooting. And more importantly, how does the country deal with this very, very horrific trend of people killing people en masse? We'll have that and a whole lot more. So stay with us. That's all happening on today's edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. Folks, welcome to the culture right here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii. Thank you so much for tuning in this afternoon. Man, oh man, we got so many great conversations that we're going to be having today. So I'm so happy that you're able to join us. Big shout out to our online culture crew, always representing, always being a part of the discussion. So folks, y'all be ready to post your comments and share your thoughts as we have a lot of conversations about a variety of issues. We're going to be covering the gambit here this afternoon. And so I certainly want to include you because no conversation is complete without you. Now, before we get started, we definitely want to let you know that Black Star Network is a people power movement, as well as it is a media institution. We want you to show your support right now. Check us out at blackstarnetwork.com. Again, that's blackstarnetwork.com. And you can show your support. We are looking for financial donations right now, folks, as we're continuing to build out this platform, build out this media institution, continuing to share the stories and have the conversations where we can tell from our own perspective and state our own case. So make sure y'all check us out and show your support at blackstarnetwork.com. All right, I want to join. Let's have for our first conversation, we're going to introduce a brand new segment that you'll be able to see here every Wednesday at 3 o'clock. We check in with our big brother and one of our foreign policy expert and analyst. He's an historian. He's a professor of African American history at the University of Houston. Today, we're going to premiere The Horn Report. Dr. Gerald Horn checking in. Good afternoon, Doc. How are you, dear brother?
It's all good.
Dr. Horn, we got a lot to talk about. So many big things that have been happening. First and foremost on the agenda, 6 months, Doc. You and I have actually been talking about this for the past 6 months. This is crazy. But this is the 6th month of the Russian-Ukraine conflict. And there has been so much that has been talked about, so many twists and turns in this story. But more importantly, this is an war that has taken thousands of lives on both the Ukrainian and the Russian side, not just in terms of the casualties, but also the soldiers themselves. Both governments are taking a beating. And I think that the biggest upset of this whole war, Doc, is the simple fact that Russia underestimated Ukraine in dealing with its power and its might. What's your assessment of what's been happening over this past 6 months?
Well, the latest news is that today, August 24th, marks the Independence Day for Ukraine. And in that regard, U.S. President Joe Biden has just sent another multi-billion-dollar arms package to Ukraine. And I think that helps to explain how and why it is that Ukraine, which has a population between 40 and 50 million versus Russia's about 150 million, has been able to acquit itself so well, because it has been armed to the teeth by the United States. You should also know that sadly and unfortunately, the US basketball star Brittany Griner, who arrived in Moscow in February 2022, unfortunately with cannabis oil, and therefore has been under detention since then. I'm more optimistic than ever that she will be released sooner rather than later, because apparently negotiations are proceeding forthwith. Now, just in case your audience may be wondering, I'm not optimistic because former Chicago Bulls and Detroit Pistons star Dennis Rodman is apparently headed to Moscow to negotiate. I based that upon other news reports. This Russia-Ukraine conflict also has had manifest and manifold implications for Africa, because to the extent that the United States North Atlantic allies, particularly France and Germany, begin to boycott Russian natural gas and Russian oil, for example, they're turning increasingly to African energy, particularly Nigerian and Algerian energy as well. The problem there is that the African nations have not been enthusiastic about sanctioning Russia, which has led the Congressional Black Caucus's Gregory Meeks of Southeast Queens to carry legislation that would call on the State Department in the United States to penalize African nations who are not on all fours with regard to US policy sanctioning Russia. This has caused consternation in Africa. You might recall that US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken was just in Pretoria, South Africa, and he got an earful from the South African Foreign Ministry as a result of this legislation. You should also know, as represented in remarks just today by the French President Emmanuel Macron, that this Russian-Ukraine conflict may mark a turning point in terms of the history of the world. Because what's happening is that these sanctions against Russia, to an extent, have backfired. You have record inflation in Great Britain. There's the possibility that Europeans will be freezing in the dark because they're not able to get African energy online soon enough, fast enough to substitute for Russian energy. And at the same time, you have nations like Turkey, or Turkey, as it likes to call itself nowadays, which are playing a double game. On the one hand, they're part of NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization led by the United States of America. On the other hand, the Turkish regime, or the Turkey regime, is cozying up quite warmly to Russia. Hundreds of businesses from Russia have put down stakes in Turkey in the last 6 months. So this war that's unfolding might turn out to be a turning point in world history.
I like that. You've been alluding to that for ever since we've had in this conversation. And you know, one of the big things that I think is interesting is the fact the amount of money that the United States has been investing. The other thing has been the stability of the Russian ruble, you know, and how that is going to create a domino effect on the global economic stage. So to that point of you're saying that this might be a turning point, I think so, Doc. I really think so. And, you know, when we look at how things have gone, based upon Putin's philosophy and his behavior over these, you know, just before this moment and then now even up until this present day, do you think that he's going to stop? Is there a point where he says, you know what, we're not meeting the goals that we wanted to meet. We're losing a lot of people. My country is suffering. Is there a point that you foresee where he will say, you know what, we need to pull out of this situation before this becomes very, very impactful down the line?
Well, it's really unclear. Keep in mind as well that your assessment of what's happening on the battlefield sometimes turns upon which sources you're reading. If you read the New York Times and the Washington Post, you get the impression that Ukraine is prevailing. If you read Russian sources or sources friendly to Russia, you get the opposite viewpoint. Indeed, the viewpoint in Russian and pro-Russian media is that what Mr. Biden is trying to do by shipping all these arms to Ukraine is to prevent a collapse of the Ukraine regime before the midterm elections in November, because it's unclear, given the catastrophe in Afghanistan of August 15th, 2021, when you had this helter-skelter, shambolic U.S. pullout of Afghanistan and the collapse of the pro-U.S. regime, there is a feeling in the White House that Mr. Biden and the Democrats cannot withstand a similar sort of collapse in Ukraine. Likewise, with regard to this war, I'm very concerned by the fact that the person who may be the incoming British Prime Minister, speaking of Liz Truss replacing Boris Johnson, has been dropping broad hints about the use of nuclear weapons. And of course, Mr. Putin did the same thing some months ago, although he's not done it in the last few months. This is quite concerning because the use of nuclear weapons would have global impact. It can lead to the deaths of billions, including people in the United States of America. So I think that it's well past time for the peace movement to get more engaged with regard to this war and conflict.
And I would agree with you on that one, Doc. Karina checked in, one of our loyal viewers. Karina, good afternoon. Good to hear from you, sis. Karina, you checked in and you posted all the money sent to Ukraine, our taxpayer dollars being leveraged to assist everyone but us. Then student debt can and most definitely should be eliminated entirely, period. But you know what? And we started the conversation about, of course, President Biden making this big announcement about, canceling just a small portion of the student loan debt. But Dr. Horn, talk to us a little bit about, how do you have that conversation? How do you just justify one thing for another, considering we were sending literally billions of dollars to this other country to protect them, and yet only thousands of dollars. I mean, of course, millions is going to be the average, but only $10,000 per student borrower is going to be affected from this situation. I think there's two different pots because that's how government works. But to the American citizen, to the American student who is crushed under this debt, and they're seeing how we're proceeding across the waters, how do you justify it?
It's difficult, if not impossible, to justify, and I would like to echo the criticism of Derek Johnson of the NAACP, who tweeted on receipt of the news about this cancellation of 10,000, perhaps to 20,000 debt of students, that this was wholly insufficient. I should also say that there is a threshold. What I mean is that if you have an income of $125,000, then, I should say more than $125,000, you may not be able to cancel any debt. And so there is a further limitation with regard to this. However, even with this pittance that's being tossed out to students, a significant percentage of whom happen to be African American, I'm hoping that the cancellation of student debt will allow people to catch up on their rent fees, to catch up with regard to their car payments, to catch up with regard to child support payments, etc. Because this country is headed, I'm afraid to say, to a recession, and we're going to need all the help we can get.
Absolutely. And speaking about the state of the country, and I'm glad that you brought this up, let's talk a little bit about now moving from Russia and going across to the motherland of Africa. You wanted to discuss the elections in Kenya and Angola, and there are some major elections that are taking place there. Give us the update on that situation, please, Doc.
Well, a few weeks ago, an election was held in Kenya, East Africa, which is the ancestral homeland of President Obama. There were two main contestants, Raila Odinga and William Ruto. The election is now in the courts, which is heartening because in the past, when there have been close elections, violence has erupted, which has been terrible news, particularly since Kenya is the powerhouse of East Africa. There is a large expatriate USA community in Nairobi, the capital, which mirrors the expatriate community across the continent in Accra, Ghana, West Africa. So we should pay careful and close attention and trust that these elections will be resolved peacefully. With regard to Angola, that vote is taking place today as we speak. And it's really important for Black Americans to pay attention to this election, because during the bad old days of the slave trade, it's estimated that 35% or more of the Black American population have ancestral roots in Southwest Africa, in the Angola-Congo region. There's no accident that the leading prison in the state of Louisiana is called Angola State Prison. Ironically, the enslavers brought Africans across the Atlantic, and then if they committed some minor transgression, they were tossed into a dungeon in Angola State Prison. You may have heard of the recent death of Albert Woodfox, a former Black Panther, who was incarcerated in Angola State Prison for decades, most of which were in solitary confinement. In any case, the United States has played a very negative role in Angola. On the occasion of Angola independence in 1975, you saw the United States Central Intelligence Agency, along with then apartheid South Africa, intervene to try to reverse the triumph of the ultimately victorious party, MPLA, which is still in power as of 2022, but is now being challenged by the opposition party, UNITA, which was backed by the United States for decades in league with apartheid South Africa. Unfortunately, the MPLA's record leaves a few points to be desired. You may know that in this country of horrific poverty, perhaps the second richest Black woman in the world is from Angola, the daughter of the late president, Jose Eduardo dos Santos, of course, second to Oprah Winfrey. So there's a lot of concern. There's a lot of consternation in Angola. So we'll have to watch carefully to see what the result will be.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you mentioned that, because and I'm not going to assume that folks across this part of the world don't keep up with African news, but I think it's hard for us to kind of relate to it and help folks to make the connection, connect the dots for what's happening over there and how it impacts it over here. Given that these elections are happening the way they are happening, Doc, does that change? Will that impact the plight of our people as it relates to this Russian-Ukraine situation? Will that impact the relationship that the United States currently have with countries in Africa?
It's possible. Angola is a major oil producer. In fact, you may recall that during the years of U.S. intervention in Angola, oftentimes they were being supported. That is to say, the United States intervention was being supported by U.S. oil companies who wanted their share of Angolan oil. And to the extent, once again, that the United States begins to boycott the natural resources from Russia, the United States will be turning it inevitably to Angola. But I would like to caution our Angolan friends about what's happening in the world. You may have seen the news today that within a decade or so, California will be banning cars that use gasoline. You'll have to go electric by 2035. This is going to have enormous impact on the petroleum industry. It'll have enormous impact on Angola and Nigeria, major petroleum producers. It'll also have major impact on Black auto workers in Detroit, who are used to building these traditional cars, whereas the new electric cars involve a different skill set. So it's very important for our community to keep up with all of these breaking developments. Can you hear me?
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Don't you think it's time to get wealthy? I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show on the Black Star Network focuses on the things your financial advisor or bank isn't telling you. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. Let's reconnect here with Dr. Gerald Horne as we kind of get some final thoughts from Doc. Doc, just very quickly, Dejima Boutique posted a comment talking about Murtala Muhammad, who was assassinated by the U.S. Let's poke that. Yep. And she said, let's ask Henry Kissinger, bringing up that point. Give us some of that history around that assassination, Doc.
Well, I'm glad that Dejima Boutique recalls this turning point in Nigerian history. It was the mid-1970s when perhaps the most progressive leader Nigeria has had since independence, speaking of Murtala Muhammad, was assassinated. There were allegations and rumors that there was U.S. complicity because of his staunch support for the MPLA, which, by the way, was also backed by the Cubans, because what I did not mention is that when the Angolans were able to defeat this U.S. CIA and apartheid South Africa intervention, it was because of the assistance of Cuban troops backed by the Nigerians. And he had to pay the ultimate price for his politics. I recall when I was living in New York that there was a huge mural in honor of Murtala Muhammad in Brooklyn, New York, and I trust that it's still there.
That's interesting. Very, very interesting. All right, Doc, we got a couple of moments left with you. You wanted to talk about something that maybe a lot of people didn't expect you would possibly discuss, which is the situation with Kevin Durant and the New York Nets, how he has met to agree to move forward together after his trade demands over the summer. He played one game already with the new season, and they lost that game. But many people are saying that this still might be a rough season for the superstar and the Nets. What's your take on that situation, Doc?
Well, it's a real head scratcher. First of all, I was baffled when Kevin Durant, the 7-foot tall star of the Brooklyn Nets, perhaps the greatest basketball player today, no disrespect to LeBron James, by the way, said that he wanted to be traded because he could no longer work with the coach Steve Nash and the executive Sean Marks, which is surprising because, as I understand it, he and his fellow star, Kyrie Irving, had a role in the hiring of Steve Nash. In any case, apparently they kissed and made up. Apparently he's going to be entering the season alongside Kyrie Irving. I'm not sure if Kyrie being unvaccinated will keep him from playing games as it did last year when he had to sit out about half the season because of his vaccination status. And then there's Ben Simmons, who they got from the Philadelphia 76ers in exchange for James Harden. He just had back surgery. And of course, his game, despite being an all-star, is rather suspect since he hasn't developed a jump shot yet. So despite the fact that Kevin Durant is talking about bringing a championship to Brooklyn, those of us who watch the game carefully are not so sure.
Well, so it's good to hear that your analysis, because folks will probably say, oh, Dr. Horne, he know about basketball. We just thought he was all history and all facts all day. That's a beautiful thing. And you know what? I'm a Kevin Durant fan, Doc, and extremely talented, probably one of the most underrated superstars that we have in the game in this day. But I think when it's all said and done, he will have such a powerful career. Unlike what we probably see with a lot of older players where they stayed with one franchise, one team for an extended period of time. I mean, the culture has changed. The culture has changed. And I want to get your view on this very quickly. People have said that part of that is because of how LeBron moved when he went to Miami, leaving Cleveland. Now he's in LA. Do you think that was him, or is it just the fact that, you know what, these guys are playing with a different motivation, that it may not be money, but they definitely playing beyond just staying with one team? What's your take on that?
Well, I think the fact is that you make more off the court if you do well on the court.
Right.
LeBron has won 4 championships. That has led to him becoming a billionaire, most of that money coming off the court with his film production company. And so I think that's what Kevin Durant is concerned about, because he has a similar outside interest. And you might have noticed that when Draymond Green of the Warriors, the Golden State Warriors, got married a few days ago, that LeBron James showed up for the wedding. But despite the fact that Kevin Durant was one of Draymond's co-stars in the Bay Area, he did not show up. Now, I'm not sure if we should draw any inferences from that, but I found it very curious that Draymond's opponent, LeBron, showed up, but Kevin didn't show up. And of course, there are all these rumors that one of the reasons he left Golden State was because he didn't get along very well with Draymond.
Right. Exactly. All right, LaShonda checked in. LaShonda, good to hear from you. You said that was a failed power move on Durant's part. He was not going anywhere. But if I were Steve Nash, I would watch my back. Hey, let me tell you, being an athlete in today's leagues, it is nothing to play with. You know, you got to come in there that, yeah, you're going to play with the team, but you really do have to think about your individual growth and progress, because I see that more in the NFL and NBA than I see it in the MLB. So it's going to be interesting, certainly interesting. Dr. Gerald Horn Moore's Professorship of History and African American Studies at the University of Houston. You can check out his brand new segment, which premiered today, every Wednesday here at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on The Culture on the Black Star Network. We're going to talk to Doc about a whole host of things, folks. So definitely check out his insight. Doc, thank you so much for being a part of the conversations. And God willing, we'll see you next week.
Good luck to you.
Thank you, dear brother. Folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's talk about the legal drama of classified documents and former President Donald Trump. We'll be checking in with law professor and attorney, Professor Rutledge, to get her take about what should we expect next in this whole fiasco. Stay with it. That conversation is coming up next, right here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are black beyond measure.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland@RolandSMartin.com.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
as an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
There's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
Folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. Our next conversation we want to focus on the legal drama of classified documents and former President Donald Trump. As we have been seeing, folks, there has been a number of reports about this whole situation around the president returning those documents back to the hands of the National Archives. And as a result, of course, we saw that search operation going down just a couple of weeks ago. Now it's been reported. Check this out. This one blew my mind. Where we thought before that maybe it was just a few documents, it has exploded to where the president withheld over 700 pages of classified material seized from his home. Highly sensitive, national security oriented documents. 700 pages. Here's what the New York Times put out. Check this out. In the letter dated May the 10th and written by the acting U.S. archivist Deborah Steidel-Wall to one of Mr. Trump's lawyer, Evan Corcoran, described the state of alarm in the Justice Department as well as officials there began to realize how serious the documents were. It also suggested that top department prosecutors and members of the intelligence community were delayed in conducting a damage assessment about the documents' removal from the White House, as Mr. Trump's lawyer tried to argue that some of them might have been protected by executive privilege. The letter, dated May 10th and written by the acting U.S. archivist Deborah Steidel-Wall to one of Mr. Trump's lawyers, described the state of alarm, and it also suggested that top department prosecutors and members of the intelligence community were delayed in conducting this situation. And so when we look at how this whole thing is manifesting, I had to bring on someone that can give me some insight and that can give us some insight as to what the consequences were of this whole situation. So we're happy to have her back on the show with us, Professor Jerry Mathis Rutledge, who is a law professor as well as an attorney, and she teaches about the Constitution. She talks about executive privilege, and so we're happy to have Professor Rutledge joining us this afternoon to give us some insight on this situation. Professor, it's always good to talk to you. How are you, my sister?
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Professor, when we look at this thing, one of I think my biggest question to you is around consequences. What's the consequence of, and I know we haven't seen this before, like this case is a precedent because no president has taken official documents home after they leave the White House. But what are the potential consequences for this now that we know that he took a lot of highly sensitive information to Mar-a-Lago with him?
Well, we know the Attorney General is very much by the book and very methodical. So he will likely, as they continue to go through those documents, see if he has violated the law or not. We know from the search warrant that there was probable cause to believe he has violated the law, including the Espionage Act. So what could happen next would be taking the case to the grand jury, potentially potentially he being prosecuted and potentially facing jail time. But it's important also to note that probable cause, which is basically a reasonable basis to believe the law has been broken or there's evidence of a crime at a particular place, that's a very different standard than beyond a reasonable doubt. So it's really too early to tell what's going to happen. I know there are a lot of people who want to make predictions, but we really don't know because, as you said, this is unprecedented.
So if I mean, and I know that on one side of the aisle, people are expecting him that like this could be the nail in the coffin, the Democrats, right? They're like, you know what, he's finally going to be taken down. But on the other side, for all of the things that this man has already done or has put into motion, even if he hasn't physically done it himself, but he at least put into motion or created the climate to allow these things to happen. How sure should we as the American people be about this? That there is going to be some real consequences or some real punishment on the former president?
Sadly, we can't be totally confident that anything's going to happen. This is a man who said he could shoot someone in the middle of the street and nothing would happen to him.
Famous line.
Famous line. And it's been really sad and shocking how much that has been true. We know that the Justice Department and Merrick Garland aren't going to do anything until and unless all of their ducks are in a row. So that's one thing. But in terms of the hopes of the Democratic Party saying, oh, you're disqualified from running, I think that is a pie in the sky dream, honestly.
Really?
Yes. Let me tell you why. A couple of reasons. First of all, in terms of the public, he raised millions of dollars after the search warrant was executed. So his people are a new definition of ride or die. Okay, so there's that aspect of it. The other is the section that he might potentially could be prosecuted under, which is section 2071. Although it has a provision that says you could be disqualified from holding office, it's the United States Constitution that says who is eligible to run for president. In fact, they tried to disqualify Hillary Clinton for the email server thing. And it didn't work because we always look to the Constitution first. And because the Constitution doesn't say anything about you can't be convicted of a crime or 2071 trumps the Constitution, I'm pretty sure he's still going to be able to run.
Wait a minute. Hold on, Professor. Hold up. Wait a minute. Hold up. I feel like I'm living in a multiverse right now. I feel like this is a Marvel's movie right now. So you mean to tell me that he's been twice impeached? He's been considered to be the driving force behind one of the biggest domestic, I think, terrorisms and attacks on quote unquote democracy, probably within the last 50 years because of January the 6th. He's withholding presidential documents. That's all the stuff we know, right? Not even thinking about the stuff that may have happened behind the scenes and in the White House while he was there.
Right.
And you mean to tell me he is still eligible to run for office as president of the United States come 2024?
The legal process is a very slow process, and we already see him trying to use delay tactics. And even though a search warrant was issued and executed, there has been no commitment from the Justice Department that they plan to arrest him or indict him with the grand jury, any of that. So a lot of this is a process. And before then, he gets to announce whether or not he's running. And he's really, really good at politicizing these issues and claiming everything is a witch hunt. So sadly, I don't see anything in our laws that's going to prevent him from running other than the good conscience of the American people. And we see from his contributions that we're really divided on this issue.
Yeah.
I know it's like we're in a new universe. I know it sounds crazy.
So because this puts everybody in a very unique space, right? Where now it seems like the law just doesn't apply. It seems like the law is only enforced because based upon who's in power, right? Versus Like, and trust it. And look, I want you to check me on that. I'm just saying, Professor, that if this is all happening, then why should people be concerned about, quote unquote, following the law? Because this is the slippery slope, I would think.
The law is slow, but they say that the arch of justice, eventually goes to the right direction. I know I'm misquoting that, but I believe eventually it's going to catch up because we see all these things coming. But you're asking me if there's a specific provision that's going to just disqualify him flat out. I don't see that. If you're asking me that, is he going to be arrested, convicted, indicted by the grand jury, then convicted before 2024? I don't necessarily see that either. So that's really the problem. Eventually, is he going to, if the government can prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he actually broke the law, will there be a punishment? I would hope so, because one of the most important tenets of our government is that no one is above the law. So I wouldn't go so far as to say he's above the law, he's going to get off scot-free. I would say that, number one, it hasn't been proven beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law yet. Number two, there's nothing in the provision so far that say he cannot run for president. Now, this may be a great time to maybe amend the Constitution, but it's really hard to pass any laws, much less a constitutional amendment.
Right. So talk to us a little bit about, his request. His team has decided to sue the FBI, if I'm not mistaken. And then I'm starting to see even other Republican lawmakers are taking this unprecedented step of suing an agency that's a part of the intelligence community. But he's planning to sue the FBI, and he has asked for a special request to have a special master to oversee the review of the documents that were taken from his residence. Talk to us a little bit about what is that? What is the special master? What's the role of the special master, and why would he make that request?
So a special master is basically a third-party attorney who's supposed to, in a very neutral fashion, look through the documents to make sure there's nothing that's privileged that should be withheld from the government. It's usually a retired judge or an attorney. And it's rare. We saw a special master issued in Michael Cohen's case when his office was searched by the FBI. A special master was granted just to make sure there wasn't any kind of confidential communications between himself and then President Trump. So that would be an appropriate use of the special master. Here, we're talking about Mar-a-Lago, the president's house. There's also a club where other people can go in and out. And we're talking about a 2-week delay, right? The search warrant was executed 2 weeks ago. And so if he was really concerned about the FBI looking through confidential information, they should have objected a long time ago before now. Right. Because the FBI is probably just about done looking through everything, and they've already got whatever smoking guns they're going to come up with. So that's one thing that suggests that this is really just a publicity stunt. The other thing that suggests it's a publicity stunt is the filing itself. I looked at the legal documents, and it's been heavily criticized as just a joke almost. The language seems very defensive, talking about how Trump has been treated unfairly, and they're using the FBI as a weapon, and all of these things that really don't have any legal justification. But I think the biggest telltale sign was the judge. So instead of going to the judge who issued the search warrant, which I think most competent lawyers would do, he goes to another judge who he happened to appoint. And that judge says, why are you coming to me? I don't think I have jurisdiction. Or in other words, I don't have any legal basis to hear this case. I'm not sure if I do. Tell me what jurisdiction I have. Number two, what do you want me to do about this? And number three, there's some sample motions on my website because you guys kind of messed this up. So all of that suggests that it was more important for him to file something for the public and his supporters than something that would be effective. So I think the chance of a special master being appointed are very slim. And the most that it would do is just further delay. And why does he want to delay? He wants to delay so he can keep saying, oh, I'm running for president now. This is just a witch hunt.
Right. And how does executive privilege falls into that? Because he was bringing that up as well.
So executive privilege applies to the president. Donald Trump is no longer the president. So it's kind of laughable that he's trying to claim something that just doesn't apply to him. The other thing about executive privilege, it doesn't work the way he's hoping it works. It's not a magic wand that you can say, I hereby declassify whatever I feel like declassifying. I mean, can you imagine former President Obama leaving the White House and just saying, you know what, I'm just going to declassify everything? The whole thing is absolutely ridiculous. But he tried it. And the Justice Department and the legal counsel, they've all looked at it. They laughed at it. That's probably not going to fly anywhere at all.
So, and speaking of President Obama, I got to say this. He did not have 33 million pages of classified documents. The National Archives even said that
the National Archives. The National Archives actually said that they have more documents that President Obama turned over than any other presidential library, because he was so dutiful with turning over 300 million emails and everything. And that's a year-long, month-long process, because you know you're leaving office eventually. But here we have a president that somehow in his brain didn't really think it was going to be over, and really does think in his mind, these are my documents. But these aren't his documents. These are the people's documents. This is the property of the United States of America.
Right. And it's just like, I'm going to take my work home. Like, bro, you don't have a job no more.
Well, not only is he trying to take his work home, you're right.
He's talking about, yo, I'm just going to take my work home for the weekend. Like, you know, you don't work here.
Well, here's the other thing I want us to look at as well. This is a person who former President Obama said had no intellectual curiosity about the job. I don't know if you remember when we were transferring power and President Obama met with the then president-elect Donald Trump, and he finally had access to all this classified information, and he was disinterested. There have been reports throughout his presidency that he just wasn't that interested in reading or knowing about all of this stuff. So it's really peculiar that a person with that kind of lack of interest would print out, because most of these documents should have been digitized, would print out all these documents and put them in boxes. So what his actual intent was, we don't know yet, but I'm really looking forward to finding out.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, let me get some thoughts from our online culture crew. Folks are checking in, and folks, you can certainly post your comments, and we'll try to get to as many as possible during this conversation with Professor Rutledge. King Lee, my God, brother King Lee, you checked in and said, "Look, the orange clown should have already been charged. Trust me, if it was you or me, we would have already been indicted months ago, King." Months ago. Thank you, King Lee, for checking in. Sophia, you checked in and said, look, this is a complete breach, and there needs to be stricter rules just in case another moron gets elected again. And I think to Sophia's point, Professor, you know, do you foresee that there are going to be some new conversations about classified documents as a result of this? I mean, I know, again, this is unprecedented, but will this force the National Archives and other folks to say, you know what, we're going to have to create some new rules around this?
Absolutely. The Presidential Records Act was actually established in response to President Nixon's administration and the whole mess with Watergate, right? Because before, we relied and trusted on the president's patriotism to do the right thing. And presidents before Nixon were doing the right thing. But then Nixon comes along and says, these embarrassing documents and tapes, they belong to me. So after that administration, the Presidential Records Act was passed. So I think similarly, after all of this is over, we're going to see new legislation to make it even more clear on what a president should do and hopefully the punishments.
Absolutely, absolutely. Coroner, you checked in and said, yet he is still unhinged and still walks the earth without consequence for any of his crimes. Yeah. That's the part. That is the part. Oh, man. Thank you so much, sis. Again, Shalinda, you said totally in a Twilight Zone. Yeah, I feel like we're in a Black Mirror, Twilight Zone, alternate reality multiverse when it comes to this guy and his followers. I can't get past this, Professor. Like, his followers, they're going all in. What do you make of that? I mean, people who often profess that they know the law, people who say that they're following the law, and then they're doing the exact opposite. How does that work?
I think it's very frightening, and I wish I had an answer for why it's happening. I mean, even in his legal filings, it seemed like a veiled threat to Merrick Garland, saying that, the people are very angry and I'll do my best to try. I mean, it's just ridiculous. We've had FBI agents on edge who feel like their security and safety is being threatened. IRS is feeling concerned about safety and security, and it's all because of the power of this person's words. Words matter. Words have always mattered. Hillary Clinton said that all during the campaign, and no one listened. And his words tend to have some really, really severe consequences. Will I ever understand the nature of someone who, in spite of it all, wants to ride with Donald Trump? No, I don't understand, but I can tell you what is not the traditional things that we thought of when we thought of the Republican Party, right? It has nothing to do with fiscal spending or, get the government out of our business. It's none of that traditional stuff or conservative values. This is something very, very deeper, perhaps even primal, that's going on here. And I know other people have named it as well. I think I don't know what to think of what's going to happen. The fact that he literally can control and command and influence all the other Republicans who are being elected is frightening. It's also frightening when we think of who Donald Trump 2.0 is going to be. Because Trump had a lot of his own. You can tell someone else mentioned that he's become unhinged, and people have talked about his erratic behavior. 2.0 is going to be more polished. Are we ready to face a Trump 2.0? And sadly, I don't think we are.
Yeah. Ron DeSantis is not going to be, he's not going to make the same blatant mistakes that we see. And you know what, Professor, I'm thinking about the Black political leader right now, as we wrap up this part. But, thinking about the Black political leader, what is one of the big things that word of advice that you would give to Black political leadership during this time? Because just as much we've heard about Donald Trump and his things, I've constantly read about Black political leadership doing everything from misappropriation of funds to other underhanded things, right? And I still believe that we just don't get the fact that even though you're in those spaces, sitting at those tables, you cannot do things the same way as your white counterpart. What word of advice as a professor, as a lawyer, and just a woman who has values? So what would you say to the next generation of Black political leadership that's looking to get into these spaces and try to make a change?
The first thing I would say is don't be used. We're seeing a lot of, and I think we're going to see more Herschel Walker types.
Oh, right? Lord.
who may or may not have any business near the political arena for lots and lots and lots of reasons, who are okay being used by a political party. And some people would argue that Kanye West was the same way. So I would caution my Black political leaders, number one, if you're conservative and that's your party, I don't have a problem with you. I have a problem with you being used. Right? So that's number one. Number two, it's the whole thing we all knew when we grew up. You have to be twice as good. You really do. And I think that's one of the things that was so heartbreaking about Andrew Gillum in Florida, right? Because he did not need to get caught up in that stuff that he got caught up in. There were so many people,
that's a good point,
rallying for him and rooting for him. So you really, really have to be careful. I know that politics and power can be very seductive, but there are people out there who think that we're at war, and they're becoming more vocal, more violent, and more political savvy. And we need competent people in those spaces to protect the idea of democracy that I think the African American community believes in. Clearly, the idea of democracy is not what we thought it was, because people are so willing to throw it away.
Right.
But I think we who have died and bled and fought for this country do believe in democracy. We do believe in the potential of America. And we've got to fight for the potential of America for all of us and our children, not just so some particular group can be in power. So to be really, really careful. I think if you're called to do a political office now, it's a calling. It shouldn't just be a job or a career, because the stakes are just too high for you to think that, oh, I'm going to get a new car or I'm going to get this big check. We need you. And if you're even thinking about running for office, most politics are local. Run for office, educate yourself, join political organizations like Win with Black Women and Higher Heights and all of that. Get involved, vote, for heaven's sake. There are so many people who don't vote. There's so many of our young Black students who are apathetic, and we can't afford it.
And to that point, Professor, that's the great concern that I have. And even more so looking at the Constitution. And I know this is a big question and you may not want to answer. We got to bring you back on to answer this one. But I think there needs to be a discussion about whether Black folks should continue to put our hopes and dreams into the Constitution. Should we continue to believe in the Constitution? Should we continue to adhere to the Constitution in a sense of, you know, this idea that we're going to create, it will be a part of a more perfect union, this idea that we're going to be a society of laws and rules, because it seems like all of these rules are being broken by those in government and in those in leadership. All those rules are being broken. And if you have a broken, you know, I was always told no leadership is sometimes better than bad leadership. And so I don't know. I don't want to throw it on you like that, Professor. I want you to come back. But
I'll come back. But I will say this. The Constitution may be imperfect, but it's a beautiful document. It's one of the best constitutions of any nation. It is so important and so valuable. It can fit in our pocket. And so many people haven't even bothered to read it. Just because there are bad people interpreting it doesn't mean you can throw the whole document away. So yes, I still believe in the Constitution. I still believe in the justice system and the belief of the American dream and democracy. And I'm not ready to give up. And I'm certainly not going to let a bunch of bullies make me give up that dream.
See, that's why I had you on here. You were prepared for that. You were prepared for it. All right, Professor, we appreciate you. Professor Rutledge, who is a law professor, USA Today columnist. She's a writer, she's a researcher, and she's a former prosecutor. And she's one of our contributors here on The Culture, here on the Black Star Network. Professor, always a pleasure. We'll certainly bring you back on. Good to see you again.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's talk about the Sutherland Springs mass shooting, get an update from one of the attorneys, Jamal Al-Safar, to give us an update about the victims in that shooting and what do we expect next. Stay tuned for that. And later on this hour, I want to talk to you about what Maryland, the state of Maryland, is doing to create a new alert system. I'm going to give you the details and I'm going to ask you, what do you think? So stay with us. A lot to get to in the next hour of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
When we invest in ourselves, our glow, our vision, our vibe, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shootings.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. When you talk about blackness and what happens in black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
Folks, welcome to the second hour of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. We do appreciate you for tuning in. If you're just tuning in, make sure y'all check us out the first hour as we premiered the Horn Report with Dr. Gerald Horn, giving us an update on a variety of international and local and domestic topics. Also, we checked in with Professor Rutledge, who is a USA Today opinion writer and a law professor and an attorney, to give us some insight about those classified documents from that President Trump has now been is under scrutiny for 700 pages. So definitely check out the first hour on the rerun, the replay. Y'all can check us out, all of those conversations and a whole lot more. Go to our website at blackstarnetwork.com. And while you're there, make sure that you drop something in the bucket, as we are calling for you to show your support for Black-owned media today. So support us at blackstarnetwork.com. If you've been enjoying the conversation, especially with our online culture crew on Facebook and YouTube, we want your support, because we want to keep this momentum going as we continue to tell our story and plead our case. And that can be found at blackstarnetwork.com. All right, folks, I wanted to have another discussion about mass shootings. As we know, and as we've talked about on this show and on other shows here on Black Star Network, mass shootings has become more and more prevalent in society, where there has been a higher number of mass shootings over these past couple of years than it has ever been. Today, we wanted to talk to an attorney for the victim's family, which we have joining us, Jamal Al-Safar, who represents the victim's family and survivors of the Sutherland Springs mass shooting. If you remember, this mass shooting occurred back on November the 5th of 2017, where Devin Patrick Kelly of New Braunfels, Texas, went into a church and gunned down 26 church members during that Sunday service. And it was one of the most horrific mass shootings in our history. And now, when we look 5 years later, we're seeing these things continue to happen. So we want to welcome Attorney Al Safar to the culture here on the Black Star Network to give us an update about the victims, the families of the victims, and more importantly, about where we are in this country. Jamal, thank you so much for joining us. We truly appreciate it.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Farajii. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. First and foremost, this has been 5 years. And unfortunately, there has been so many other mass shootings that have happened in this country that, just to bring people up to date on what happened in Sutherland Springs on that fateful day in November, it just seems like a blur. And when you have 26 people gunned down in a church on a Sunday morning, it shouldn't be a blur. But unfortunately, we're seeing more and more of this happening. First and foremost, Jamal, how are the families 5 years later?
Well, I think it's a great question. I'm asked a lot to speak about what happened in Sutherland Springs in that small community church. And it's hard for people to remember it. It's hard to believe that when a gunman goes in with an AR-15 and kills 26 parishioners while they're about to sit down and pray, and by the way, severely injured 22 others, that is somehow completely lost in our consciousness, right? And we have these categories of mass shootings in this country where this one in Sutherland Springs was the worst church shooting in history, but then we have the worst concert shooting in history, the worst movie shooting, and of course, as we saw unfortunately recently, the worst school shooting, which also happened in Texas, which, by the way, Texas has the unfortunate moniker of having some of the worst mass shootings in the last 10 years in all the country.
Wow.
So we're not doing things right here in Texas and haven't been for some time. But to answer your second question about these families, I appreciate that question on behalf of the families, because when we talk about these shootings, and it's easy just to move on after a week or so of coverage, and for those that either survived the shooting itself or lost loved ones in the shooting, this actually gets worse for them over time, not better. We say time heals all wounds, but what I've seen is that usually what happens in the months and even first few years after these kinds of killings, and keep in mind that for this one, and when you're talking about school shootings, when you're talking about church and house of worship shootings, just like this one or in Charleston, these are places where people literally are in their sanctuaries, right? The places they think are the safest parts of the world, schools, churches. Yeah. And so when you're a mother or a father or a brother or a sister, and you know that not only were those places literally not safe from America's obsession with guns and AR-15s, but that in the moment before their deaths, those people were living in absolute horror and fear. And to know that your loved one went through that before they passed, it is really difficult. And that's part of what the survivors are dealing with. So, how they're doing, it's really a tough, complex answer, because they're not doing great.
And I'm not surprised to hear that, Jamal, because I would think that tragedy is on repeat in this country.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so because we have all of these other shootings, it's like you really don't get an opportunity to just grieve. You really don't get an opportunity to just not care about people being killed and in the spaces that they deem to be the safest spaces. You know what I mean? So I could only imagine. I mean, my heart and prayers and condolences go out to the families that you represent, because I could just only imagine that, you try to work and get through it. Then you got to work to try to keep your families, your loved ones' memory alive. And then you got to work to try to get some justice. And then, you got all of these different things. Your heart and your spirit just don't have time to grieve.
Well, I think that's right, and it's almost like re-injury. Every time there's a mass shooting, I text or call my families and say, "Are you okay?" And and it's a lot. It's happening all the time, and for them, it's a every one of the survivors, by the way, every single one of them, even those that weren't in the church, have been diagnosed with severe post-traumatic stress disorder. So many of them don't go out anymore, can't be out in public, even if they weren't in the church and survived, because of the severity of what they know happened and where it happened as well. The first year or so, these families are just trying to do what you said. They're trying to get justice. They're trying to advocate. They're trying to keep their families' memories alive. But then reality sets in and living sets in, with the law still permanently remaining. And a lot of our families slipped into severe suicidal ideation. We had to really help try to manage that as best we could, because when everything else leaves, when everybody stops caring and moves on with their lives, and then you're stuck alone in that grief, it can become impenetrable. And it comes in waves. Every time there's a shooting, they relive it. Every time a birthday passes or somebody asks you, well, how many kids do you have? And they're like, well, I had 4, but now I only have 2. And then, well, you have to explain it. So these waves and the world and reality keeps crashing down, and causing this grief to be revisited. And it's unique because of the way in which these families all across the country, not just these Sutherland Springs families, but the way in which they were violently gunned down. And that is something that I think that is the hardest thing for them to deal with, because it just never really ends. And one of the things we tried to do is in this case, like how the heck is this guy, had Jamal, an attorney for them? Well, in this particular shooting, just like with the Charleston, South Carolina church shooting at the Emmaus Church, and in the Parkland shooting in the school in Florida, this was actually a failure of our federal government at preventing the mass shooting. And
how so?
So, maybe a lot of your listeners may be aware that there are background check laws, but in the United States, and they're actually pretty good at preventing gun violence if they're implemented properly. And what we've learned is law enforcement around the country are not very good at making sure that background checks are actually implemented. But when they are, they're very good at reducing gun violence. And what we were able to learn in this case was you mentioned the shooter. He was discharged from the Air Force. When he was in the Air Force, he was convicted of 2 felonies: beating his wife with a gun and beating his child. And he was convicted and served time. And under the law, you are required, the law enforcement agencies, the cops in the military, are required to report those convictions to the federal background check system, which then puts the guy on a blacklist. He can't get guns at any federally licensed firearms store. Well, they didn't do that in this case. They had over 100 opportunities to submit his information. They just failed to do it. And as a result, he just walked into a store, bought an AR-15, a bunch of other guns, and thousands of rounds of ammunition, when he would have been not only stopped from doing that had he been reported, but he would have been subject to immediate arrest and a 10-year sentence because he's a felon. And so what we learned was, not only did the Air Force not do that in this case, but they were being warned for 30 years. That's right. 30 by the federal government, various investigators, that I'm talking Department of Defense wide, law enforcement in the entire military, Army, Air Force, Navy, were failing to report felons, convicted dangerous felons, into the system at a 30 to 50% failure clip. Now, what that means is that almost 1 out of every 2 dangerous felons they were convicting for violence were not being reported to the background check system. They were served their sentences free, tens and tens of thousands to go buy guns. simply for not following the law on reporting. And despite being told this for 30 straight years, they never corrected it until these brave families, in my case, filed their lawsuit against the federal government, won their lawsuit against the federal government, and proved that background checks work if you implement them. And then they changed the system to make it safer finally. But it took these families filing this lawsuit in federal court down here, and we had 2 trials, and first mass shooting trial I'm aware of in history against the federal government that actually went to trial and won. And so the big picture here is we know, and we proved in a court of law, that the background check systems work if we actually implement them. And, you know, the reason why that's important too is because we're in the middle of all this gun safety debate. What can we do? And we're trying to expand background checks so that, you know, wherever you buy guns, you have a background check. I don't know if you knew this, but they only take about a minute to do. They're not, it doesn't take that long to do these.
Is
checks.
that across the board? Is that in Texas, or is that just across the board?
It's if you are a store, a federally licensed gun store, like an Academy, Dick's Sporting Goods, you know, the Great Bass Outdoor Stores, all those. You have to do, every purchase has to go through a background check system of the FBI, and it takes like a minute. You literally just get their information, type it in, and it works really well. We actually proved it works really well if you put these people into the system. That's the key. These folks that have been convicted and are dangerous. And so
Jamal, let me ask you this though, because you're in Texas, one of the most, and I would say, you know, conservative in a lot of ways, but most liberals in when it comes to, you know, gun ownership and gun possession, right. In the country. And I'm still trying to figure out how is the state of Texas not making the connection that maybe we need to tighten up our gun laws here, because if you're mass shooting, and I'm just using this, and I'm not saying this with any disrespect, but if this is a state that has more mass shootings than any other state in the country, why is the dots being connected saying, hey, we're having mass shootings, but we also got this open carry law, we also got these lax gun control, gun ownership laws? Why is that not happening?
Well, you know, Texas has gone nuts. They've gone the other direction. Despite all facts to the contrary, they've actually decided to make gun law, you know, to make it easier, right? And you know, we just had the other Uvalde shooting just a few months ago, 3 months ago today, and that Governor Abbott passed a law last year that allowed 18-year-olds to get AR-15s. That was not on the books in Texas our entire history until last year, and Governor Abbott pushed for it and got it passed, and this kid got it on his 18th birthday. So that alone would have prevented that shooting if he wasn't allowed to get that gun. But what is shocking to me here in Texas is we've had Uvalde, we've had Sutherland Springs. Do you remember Walmart in El Paso? 20 people were murdered. We had Odessa.
Yes, sir.
We had Odessa, 12 people. Santa Fe High School, 19 children. We had the Dallas police a few years ago. I was in Dallas when that happened, downtown. The 4 or 5 police officers were killed by an AR-15 holding individual. Texas in the last 5 years has I mean, we have the most mass shootings and at the same time have decreased and made it easier to get guns of mass destruction. And so, you know, to answer your question, the dots are connected. We know, our case, Sutherland Springs, we proved you do implement these background checks. You should extend them to, if you're a felon or a dangerous person who cannot buy a gun at Academy or Dick's Sporting Goods or wherever, why should you be able to buy it online? Why should you be able to go to a gun show? I mean, if you're okay with us doing a background check at Academy store, why aren't you okay with us preventing the same person from going to a gun show? There's only one answer to this question. There's only one answer, and it's money and influence. And
the lobby.
The gun manufacturer, it's not even the NRA anymore. It's not even the NRA anymore. It's the gun manufacturers. They have so much influence. And every time they see any kind of safety rule that says, listen, let's not let 18-year-olds get AR-15s. Let's not let people who've been, institutionalized get AR-15s. All they see is dollar signs going down. Well, that's a million less sales that year that we get. And what we know in the Uvalde shooting, the school shooting down the road, is that 18-year-old, got his gun that was made by a manufacturer, Daniel Defense, that the day of the shooting posted on Twitter a picture of a person passing an AR-15 to a 3-year-old with a biblical quote attached to it. They're now marketing to our kids.
Damn. Jamal, I know you got to hop off, but we in about 30 seconds, what's the next step? Because we know that the victims and the families of the Sutherland Springs mass shooting is calling to stop the appeal. Am I correct?
Yes,
the Department of Justice.
So we got a $230 million verdict against the federal government for their failures here and their 30-year failures, and the Department of Justice filed an appeal recently to appeal that verdict. And here's what I would say in a nutshell. The current administration, the Biden administration, agrees with me. They agree that these gun background checks work and need to be extended to all sales, rightfully so, and that they can and do prevent shooting. Not all shootings, but we know they would have prevented this one. They know they would have prevented the one in Charleston, South Carolina church, and then we know they would have prevented the Parkland one. And despite that, his DOJ is filing an appeal where they are going to be arguing that these background checks wouldn't have prevented these shootings. And that disconnect between his DOJ and the president needs to be called out. What needs to happen is the DOJ needs to take a step back and go, what are we doing here? We can't, on the one hand, say that these background checks help prevent gun violence, and they do, while filing a clandestine appeal saying that they actually don't work. All you're doing is handing the gun lobby and gun manufacturers a victory that they don't deserve.
Absolutely. Jamal, we thank you so much for your time. And, again, our hearts and our prayers and our condolences go out to the families of the Sutherland Springs mass shooting. And, as this whole process, this lawsuit and this case develop, we would certainly be welcome to bring you back on, Jamal, to give us an update.
I'd love to, and I'd love to go even more in depth on. Is one thing we learned a heck of a lot about these gun laws and what really works, and I think it's one of the most important issues facing our country. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Jamal Al-Safar, who is an attorney for the victims and their families for the Sutherland Springs mass shooting. Jamal, thank you again for joining us here on The Culture.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Absolutely. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's talk about a new alert system in my home state of Maryland that is changing the game about racism in this country. I want to have a one-on-one conversation with you to get your thoughts about this. So we'll talk about that. So stay with us. A lot coming at you in the final 30 of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network.
When we invest in ourselves, we all shine. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy, focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
When we invest in ourselves, we're investing in what's next for all of us. Growing, creating, making moves that move us all forward. Together, we are Black beyond measure.
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in Black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland@RolandSMartin.com.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate Black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. Wanted to have a one-on-one conversation about a new alert system that's going to be instituted in my home state of Maryland. Now, if you live in Maryland or you're around in the DMV, which for those who may not know, DC, Maryland, and Virginia, you will probably see some benefit of this system. It is now where the state of Maryland is launching what they call the Emmett Till Alert, to inform Black leaders of racist, hate-driven incidents. Now, this has been reported. Now, according to the reports and according to the organization, the organization, let me make sure we have it here, the Caucus of African American Leaders. It's one of its leaders, Mr. Carl Snowden, has said that not all hate crimes, and let's throw this up there on the screen, Keen, a little bit about this system. Where he says not all hate crimes are investigated, not all hate crimes are reported for a variety of reasons. He said that what we are going to do is make sure every hate crime that we're made aware of goes out on this alert system. And this alert system comes as a result of being privately funded effort where there have been a number of disturbing and troubling incidents of race issues in the state of Maryland over the past few months. Now, this alert system, folks, is something I think is really one of a kind in the fact that it will come equipped with 3 alert levels, low, medium, and high. And the company, Alert Media, will determine whether to send notifications via text messages or emails. The high alert means that the greatest likelihood of violence or death. Now, according to Mr. Snowden, he said, quote, the idea here is to have an alert system that allows to allow 170 leaders and agencies, the entire community, to know what is happening. If they get an Emmett Till alert, Take a look, folks. It's very, very serious, and they should take the necessary steps to protect themselves and their family. So I thought this was very interesting, that I wanted to have just a one-on-one discussion with you. What do you think about this idea of an Emmett Till Alert system to talk to you about, or at least make you aware of racism or racist acts or issues, race issues, race acts that are occurring in the community? Drop your thoughts, post your comments on our YouTube page, and certainly on our Facebook page. I would love to hear what you have to say. And I thought about this because, you know, one of the big things that I'm seeing now in this country, and you know, Brother Roland has been on top of keeping us aware about, you know, a lot of racist issues. If you didn't read the story, I read the story and I've thought about including it in the show today, actually. But, you know, there was a story about a black boy who went to a Little League game. And during the broadcast of this Little League game, you can see white Little Leaguers putting cotton in his hair, right? And he's not happy about it. This little black boy, this little brother's not happy about it. And so, of course, people have been, you know, the video went viral and everything. But there are so many different incidents of race. To have an alert system, which they said would be modeled after the Amber Alert. The Amber Alert system is a way for us to, of course, keep people aware of kidnappings, especially of children, right? But it also covers adults, right? But an alert system to keep us aware about race incidents, racial issues. I thought this was interesting, and I was kind of like, oh, okay, my home state, Maryland, is looking to be the state to institute with this. Do you think that this would be beneficial for us? I want you to post your comments. What do you think? Do you think it's going to be beneficial for us to have an alert system like this? I would love to hear what you got to say. And do you think this also would be great? You know, how do you feel about this idea of the alert system being named after Emmett Till? You know, it's in this country, I think that we need to have a better handle of how many racial issues or racial incidents that actually occur. Of course, we got the Department of Justice. Of course, we got the Department of Homeland Security. We got all of those agencies. But when you are able to know that somebody has posted some racist terms on a graffiti, you know, on a church wall, or somebody has hung a noose somewhere on a tree in some part of your neighborhood, would you want to know that? Would you want to know that? All right, let's go to you to hear what you got to say, my online culture crew. And if you're just joining us here, we're talking about how Maryland is going to be using the Emmett Till Alert system, where folks in the state of Maryland will be alerted and notified, state officials, clergy, and leaders of credible hate crimes and racist acts. What are your thoughts about this alert system? Let's go to the comments and share your thoughts. Sophia, you checking in, sis. You said that sounds well-intentioned. There it is. It does sound well-intentioned, right, Sophia? I mean, I think that in this day and time, we should be intentional about how we're going, you know, how we're doing things, especially when it comes to racial incidents. So I would definitely agree. Thank you, Sophia, for checking in. Janae, you said upon capturing all that data, they better start enforcing arrests, especially the KKK cops. I got you. Reminding us that racism exists yeah. You know, it makes me think back, Janae, and y'all remember when there was that big conversation about the George Floyd Act, the Justice for Policing Act, right? The act that never got passed. One of the elements is that the federal government needs to have a database of police-involved shootings of Black people, men and women, and need to keep some sort of database on hand, because at this point, we have publications like news agencies that keep a number, but there is no official database for this stuff. You know, the Department of Justice, there's no official database that you can go to, that anyone can go to figure out, you know, how many incidents of police misconduct that we have. That's in that space. But can you imagine if we had a database of how many racial incidents, like each state government would have to keep data on racial incidents for their state, you know, to that degree. And then to have an alert system added to that. It would, I think it would at least give people a proper context that racism is still alive and well in this country. Don't you? Share your thoughts, let me know. But Janae, thank you so much. You're absolutely right, which is part of the reason why personally, as one of the executive producers of the show, that we don't go too far into constantly hitting that, like letting people know racism is still alive, folks. I don't need to tell you that. You don't need to tune in all the time. Now, we could certainly talk about these things, but it gets, for me, making sure that we get out of just having this vicious cycle of just talking about it, saying how bad it is, and not really dealing with it. So racism still is alive, but it can be absolutely numbing. Mike V, my guy, you said, my question is, who is managing this? Is this DHS, Department of Homeland Security, FBI, state? What's the contingency for false alerting or alert fatigue? Ooh, I like those questions, Mike. False alerting, alert fatigue. Can you imagine you living in a space and, I mean, that would probably, check this out, if maybe if every state had this or used this type of alert system, and then your phone is constantly buzzing, you're like, damn, man, I'm moving to a neighborhood, moving to an area where this is all happening. Yeah, false alerting or alert fatigue is real. Very, very real. That's a great question. In terms of who is behind this, who is managing this, it doesn't say in the information that we got in the report, but I'm sure that the state is probably working with another partner, right? But who's keeping the data? That's the good question. Absolutely good question. PM26, you checked it, Mike. Good to hear from you. Thank you. And I saw your message, Mike, about Black Marxism. You said Farajii always be on his Marxism stuff. I got you, Mike. I definitely got you, brother. Just trying to think outside the box, but I appreciate you. PM26, you said just call it the KKK alert. The KKK alert. PM26, I like that. But I do like Emmett Till Alert, because that will force people to, if they don't know, to learn the history of our little brother, and force people to confront the issue. As Mother Till said, you know, she wanted her son to be shown so the whole world sees the ugly face of racism. Like that will force us to confront the racism. But I hear you. PM26, thank you for checking in. Taylor, you said Black folks still sending their kids to play with white folks alone. Yeah. I mean, you know, we're in this society right now for that. Willie, thank you, Taylor. Willie Frazier, my guy, you said this seems like monetization of Black trauma. A Karen and King get alerts. Would it be fast enough to give warning of a mass shooting? Sound suspect. Okay, it might be. Is it monetization of Black trauma? That's a big question, Willie. I think that's a really, really big question. When we share videos from Twitter to Facebook, Instagram, when we post videos of racism, racist acts, hate crimes, right? How do we reconcile that? Now, we don't get paid to share that, but when you send your network of people information about some racist act, right? Everybody's talking about what happened. I think, man, and the name escapes me. But when we see these videos, y'all know, when we see these videos, people are, you know, how do we describe that? Personally, and y'all know where I stand, don't send me no videos. I don't want to say them. It does something to you. But I'm not totally opposed to at least being alerted that some hate crime has been committed in my neighborhood. I think it puts people in a proper perspective. I don't want to push back too hard on that. But if we're talking about the sharing and the passing of Black death and Black trauma, I think that's a conversation we should have within the community as well, because we always sharing something. We always talking about that. So that's a good point. That's a very good point. Who benefits financially benefits a gain from that, Willie? I don't know. In a sense of, okay, you got the state, but it's an alert system. So it's like, hey, these things are happening. So we're walking a fine line here, folks. And I think, Willie, to your point, I think we're walking a fine line. Like, we want to know, like, I would want to know when certain things are happening around me. Then at the same time, not feeling like I have to learn about these things on my own. All right, so let's think about that one. Rashida, you checked in. Rashida, guess you said, yes, we need the alert system, and naming after Emmett Till will wake people up to listen and watch closely. I would agree. That's one of the things why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because the name itself and the idea really kind of struck me. And I was like, oh, this is fascinating. Got to let the culture crew, let them see what, got to talk about this. But I think this is absolutely fascinating. Jawan, Yvette, Rashida, always check. Rashida, I appreciate you. Thank you, sis. Jawan, always checking in. You said, I agree that keeping a record of these incidents is a good thing, but what actions will then happen to reduce the number of incidents? That's the most important piece to me. I think if we take a look at that, let me see because it goes to, to state officials, clergy, it goes to 170 state officials and clergy and community leaders. So it's like, if that information, if you got a racist act or a hate crime that has been committed, that goes to all of those different people who work for all of these different agencies and organizations, then the next step is looking at, okay, if I'm getting all this data, quote unquote, this live data, we're collecting it as a community leader. I'm relying on that. I'm collecting that. I'm going to the police. I'm talking to my local political leader. You know what I mean? But sometimes I feel like we need that to strengthen our case that racism is still a problem. You know what I mean? And I think you would agree with me on that one, Jawan. I think you would definitely agree with me on that one. But I appreciate you. Thank you so much. Karen Connor, you said, as a matter of protection and safety for Black people, it is an excellent idea. This is a combination of the Green Book and the Amber Alert. It is long overdue. It is a shame we need this. Yeah. And I agree. In the long run, this is about protecting it and saving lives, right? And saving us the hassle and just letting us know that these things are happening. Like, I would rather, tell me the truth, man. Because I feel like, and Karen, you may feel like this or not, but I feel like for some Black people, not everybody, but for some of us, we still live in this world, or we still move through society like this shit ain't happening. And this shit is happening every day. And it may wake us up. I'm not talking about those white people or agencies. It could be an alert to us, to wake us up to the point where we're like, man, this is really, really happening. So that's the part. Safety, protection. Yes, look, nobody wants to go out to their family. If you know there's some hate crimes being committed in downtown, you about to head downtown to enjoy a night out with your significant other, with your family. You want to know about that. I'm not driving to that. No, I want to know. I definitely want to know. So to that point, yes, I agree with you there, Karen. Thank you for checking in. McCole, you checked in. You said, look, this would absolutely be necessary. The Emmett Till Alert system to track racial incidents in the U.S. is necessary. The U.S. tracks our phones, our movements, etc. Right? Yeah. Right. Look, folks, look, we can't act like racism don't exist. We can't act like, somebody is trying to do us harm because of the color of our skin. And this might not just be about Black people. It could be against Asians. It could be against Latinos. It could be against the members of LGBTQIA. It could be against anybody, but you should know, right? We should know. You know what I mean? So we can make the best decisions. When we don't know, and this is the big part of it, when we don't know, then we put ourselves in a much more vulnerable place because we don't know. We don't know how serious things really are. McCole, thank you so much. Great point. Deborah, you checked in and said, I hope they will keep up with all the incidents that happened in Maryland. There have been so many, Deborah, in Maryland over this past couple of months. There's been so many of them. Let me just share with folks. Last month, federal officials had announced that they would investigate the Maryland State Police's employment practice to determine whether they're discriminatory. Earlier this month, Maryland residents said they found white power slogans on stickers in Columbia, which is in Howard County in Maryland, a very, very diverse county in Maryland, a diverse area in Howard County. Racist graffiti has been found on the church doors at Kingdom Celebration Center in Anne Arundel County, which is like Southern Maryland, where the caucus of African American leaders is based. So it's a lot happening, a lot. Good point. Thank you for checking in, Deborah. Robin Welch, you said, I think it's a great idea. Maybe the white people will finally get it that racism is real and still going on today. That's if they enroll to be alerted. But imagine though, Robin, check this out. Imagine maybe this will be another way for us to have a conversation, say with our, whether it's white co-workers, white neighbors. Maybe have you heard about the Emmett Till Alert system? Oh, what you mean? It's an alert system that tell you about racist acts. Man, can you imagine having a conversation with somebody about this at the job? Maybe not at the job, but maybe, and when you're out in the streets or your neighbor or something, who may not get it, who may not understand it. This could be a way. So to that point, yes. Thank you, Robin, for checking in. Zoe, you said when you travel outside the U.S. into danger zones, the U.S. Embassy provides travelers advisory notes. Great point. You said this will have financial repercussions if people start going into these hot areas. Yes. Nobody gonna want to visit your neighborhood. Nobody will want to come to your state if this was implemented across the country. But in the state of Maryland, there are some racist areas in the state of Maryland. I was, growing up in Maryland and Baltimore, you like, oh, okay. But once you leave Baltimore, which is 65% Black, once you leave Baltimore, you like, boy, you in a whole different world. You go out there into Maryland, some of them counties, Western Maryland and Southern Maryland, Charles County, like you're in a whole different situation. So yes, absolutely. Sandy, you checked in and you said that would be cool until you get the police involved, because some of the incidents involve them. And we know they are very resistant to data. Come on now. Come on. But imagine having that data though at your disposal. Now they can't run from that anymore, right? That could be something, another piece of the arsenal in the toolkit. So yeah, Sandy, thank you so much for checking in. And Mary Christie, you said, you said, I think we should have an upgraded terrorism alert to include domestic terrorism, which often includes threats or acts of racist violence against us and often mixed with politics. Yeah. And maybe that could be a part of it. Maybe that could all be a part of it, you know? And you referenced January 6th. Maybe that could be a part of it. I wish that, imagine if we had an alert system for what happened on January 6th. Imagine if there was an alert system for what we saw in Buffalo, New York. Imagine if there was an alert system for all of those places. You know what I mean? If you have a gunman, or if you have, you know, I mean, just imagine. And this could open the door for us to have some much more deeper and bigger conversations about, you know, making sure that communities that have been historically and are presently terrorized, communities that are marginalized, that this could create a different network of how we communicate. This could be another tool. But I think it's interesting, and I don't want us to completely disregard it. I think that this is an idea that whose time has come, because we are in a very, very politically partisan time, but more importantly, like, race incidents in this country has gone up. We've talked about it before. And if we're still at a place where we're kind of like sitting under a rock and not realizing that this situation, the race issue in this discussion in this country is at an all-time high. Brother Roland, you know, Big Brother Roland, he got a book out coming, What White Fear. I mean, this stuff is real, man. Remember, there used to be a time where we used to think to ourselves, like, man, ain't no white person gonna come up in our neighborhood and start shooting. That is out the window. That's totally out the window. At any given time, folks, a situation can go down. Now, I'm not trying to create no fear, but I'm just letting us know the reality of the time that we're living in. At any given time, when we least expect it, a situation can go down. So this is huge. Straight facts for Farajii. You know, someone has posted saying, I live in PG County, Maryland, and when I travel to other counties, it can be like traveling to a whole new state. Right. When I was traveling in Maryland, you need Baltimore City, you got Baltimore County, you got Howard County, you got PG County. These are like the counties with the largest concentration of Black people, right? But once you start getting into like Allegheny, you start getting up into like Hagerstown, that's where the state jails are. You know, Black folks up in there, but we just ain't living there. Weird. This is unfortunate. You know, you start to get to Charles County, you got to get into southern Talbot County, all of those places. Man, you in a whole different ballpark. You know what I mean? You just in a whole different league of dealing with people. And as a native of Baltimore City and Maryland, you know what areas you can go in and what areas you stay away from. And that's any place, right? That's any place. So it's all about safety and protection, though. But more importantly, it's about making sure that we understand how serious things really are. Shalinda, you checked in. You said we were alerted about January 6th, though. Even the Orange Man told us it was going down. My relatives in Washington was like, we ain't going out here today. Yeah. I don't know about anybody else, but when I watched TV that day, I forgot what I was doing. I was at home doing something, and it just like, you know, the TV was on, and then I saw that breaking news, and I was like, whoa. And I just couldn't believe it. Could not believe it. Yeah, I think we were all pretty much quarantined in. I think everybody was still kind of shut down at that time. So it was like, whoa, this is happening. Yeah. McCole, you said, I also agree with an alert tracking domestic terrorism. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. So these things are happening. Wanted to put that out there, that Maryland is looking to institute this new system. You may see it in the state that you're in. I would love to see California do it and some other states do it. But it's a sign for me that the state of Maryland is not totally oblivious about racism And I'm happy to hear that. Whereas the other states, they still want to create this utopia and put out this perception that, hey, you come to us, it's all good. Let us just give us an opportunity to know the truth, folks. You know what I'm saying? Like, for me, keep it real with me so I can make the best decision to save the life of my family and myself. That's all I want to know. So as this situation evolves, if there's more to this system, I will certainly let you know. But I think it's a good idea. I definitely think it's a good idea for us in this day and time. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us. Thank y'all so much for being a part of the conversation, because guess what? No conversation is complete without you. I want to thank all of our very special guests that came on today. Man, oh man, had a great number of conversations. Make sure y'all tune into the Horn Report Wednesdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with Dr. Gerald Horn. I want to thank Professor Rutledge. I want to thank Jamal Al-Safar and so many of all of you for sharing your thoughts and views about these discussions. Make sure y'all continue to support us here at Black Star Network. Go to blackstarnetwork.com. Support Black-owned media. Support having unfiltered, unadulterated, and unapologetically Black conversations. So do learn all that you can about the work that we're doing, the great shows that we have. You can find that at blackstarnetwork.com. All right, that's going to be it for me. Stay tuned. RMU, Roland Martin Unfiltered, is coming up next. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong, stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. Folks, make sure y'all follow me at The Real Farajii on Instagram, at Farajii on Twitter, and Farajii Muhammad on Facebook. Would love to connect with each and every one of you, and continue to have these discussions offline and on those spaces. So make sure you follow me, The Real Farajii on Instagram, Farajii on Twitter, and Farajii Muhammad on Facebook. And I would love to make your acquaintance and be your friend. Yeah, I will follow back, folks. Definitely will follow back. Just don't post nothing crazy, but we will definitely follow you back. All right, that's going to do it for me. Big shout out to my team, Joe Shannon, Ariel King Keenan, and of course to all of our culture crew members who you will see, God willing, tomorrow as we have more conversations. And let's keep our eyes on this situation around student debt, student loan debt, and so many other issues. But I'm definitely keeping my eyes on that. I sent out a little tweet to the president like, no, this is not enough, Mr. President, sir. It's not enough. So we'll see. Maybe there will be some changes, and maybe we can keep our fingers crossed for that $50,000 debt cancellation. We'll see. All right, folks, thank y'all for tuning in to The Culture. Truly appreciate it. God willing, we'll talk tomorrow for another exciting edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Peace.